Keywordless targeting effectively means Google's going to crawl your site and come up with what it contextually understands to be relevant and serve ads.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Paid Search NYC podcast. Very excited today to be chatting to Navah Hopkins, who doesn't need too much of an introduction. She's voted in the top 25 PPC influencers this year, international speaker. She writes for a lot of the big publications like Search Engine Journal, and that's all on top of her day job as well. So very excited to have Navah on. Navah, thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I am so excited you're standing up more East Coast PPC goodness. We need more East Coast goodness. A lot of it takes place in the Midwest or on the West Coast or in the UK, and we need a little East Coast joy.
Well, it's honestly been an absolute pleasure to do it so far. You know, doing the meetups in New York and chatting to people on the East Coast. It's been so much fun. So I will continue to fly that flag for sure. We're chatting actually the week of GML. So actually, 2 days after GML, a very big week for us. A number of big releases. I think most of those we had a bit of an eye on beforehand. So nothing too crazy. I know there's one particular thing that was a bit of a surprise. The subject we had for today was kind of the fears that people have in the industry and as it relates to change and AI. But maybe a good place to start is, what were your kind of main takeaways from GML?
Sure. So one of the biggest takeaways is that SEO was brought up in the PPC room. For those of you that don't know, GML has a teleprompter. So every single line that was shared at GML was a pre-approved teleprompter line. So having SEO brought up in the PPC room makes total sense. But it may not have been anticipated. So here's why I think it makes total sense, and kind of how to think about it. Number one, Google recently updated their quality score guidelines where organic websites might actually do better than standalone landing pages, specifically because of the context, the navigation bar, and historically those have been separate. And the reason why I suspect that was brought up is Google is very, very good at e-commerce tools. Google launches a ton of tools that just empower e-commerce, no-brainer, super easy to adopt. Lead gen, it's a little bit tougher. You kind of have to MacGyver the tools to make them fit lead gen. And I suspect that part of the reason for that is that there just isn't enough data being shared. So my kind of tin hat moment when I was watching GML, the thing that really stood out to me is that Google is asking every brand to put in their website in AI Max, with PMax, with really any campaign. And the keywordless targeting effectively means Google's going to crawl your site and come up with what it contextually understands to be relevant and serve ads. That means that if a whole bunch of people are now putting in their websites where they weren't before, that's giving Google a whole bunch of data of what would serve those brands, i.e. lead gen folks, a little bit better. So I wouldn't be surprised if GML 2026 with this update doesn't have far more of a lead gen focus, because Google will finally have the data to actually understand lead gen. Now, to be fair, this is not something Google has outright said is an objective, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's an outcome that comes from it.
Yeah. I've got a couple of questions and thoughts there. The first one is, I agree with the idea that lead gen is a space where Google has some work to do for advertisers, and I feel like value-based bidding was a big move there, getting more conversion data, understanding the funnel, and being able to help advertisers go after the right users or higher value users. On the organic side, I think one question I have there is how should people think about paid and organic teams in that world together? It feels like they need to come close together and understand the work they do and how it sort of interacts with each other more so.
Not only do paid and organic teams need to become buddies, but search and social teams need to come together and become buddies. The socialization of search has been going on for years, from the Creator Hub and all those creator tools that Google made a big push, all the demand gen enhancements, which is essentially their answer to buying ads through Meta. And it's worth noting that another line that kind of slipped under the radar was the best way to buy YouTube is through demand gen. Like that's really interesting. Like you should pay attention to those sorts of lines because that might indicate that YouTube as a standalone may not be long for this world because demand gen is a more efficient or effective way to target, and people are more comfortable buying YouTube as a collaborative buy as opposed to a standalone, even with all the amazing brand attribution metrics. But in terms of how teams collaborate, I think there is a lot of value in what we can share, but also we commiserate and we work together to get things that we don't have access to. So it's actually been really heartwarming watching both PPC and SEO teams begging at the altar of Google, trying to get insights from AI overviews in AI mode. And having that collective pressure, be like, well, it was a bug that it was released without those insights. You're going to definitely get those insights later. So it's interesting. So definitely, yeah, you need to make friends with your SEO team. You need to be more collaborative in terms of no index, no follow pages. You need to be more mindful about cumulative layout shift, which if you're not aware, cumulative layout shift is how much the site changes upon render. Cumulative layout shift is actually a quality score metric. It's part of what influences the landing page experience. And if you have a CLS or cumulative layout shift score that's higher than 0.2, that's actually a bad experience. You'll get dinged for that. So having kind of the SEO team there to collaborate with and talk about where you're sending traffic and kind of why is a page taking so long or changing so much is definitely a worthwhile endeavor.
Yeah. Would it be fair to predict that Google's going to release tools in the UI to help people understand the impacts of some of these changes, whether it's technical SEO like that or maybe on-page SEO?
So I don't know if everyone's aware, but there's actually a report currently within Google Ads that will tell you the organic impact of your keywords. So if you connect your Search Console to Google Ads, you're able to actually see what the overlap is between your paid search and your organic, how many queries your organic is coming up for, that paid is also coming up for, if an ad was served for both or just one or the other, where on the page your organic is versus where on the page your paid is. There's a lot of really interesting reports there. So I think that those sorts of reports might get a more prominent seat. The more useful tools are going to be on websites and kind of just reading those websites, but then also thinking about the agentic web, different agents interacting with one another. And I think one of the fear areas, kind of the theme of what we were supposed to talk about today, is people not quite understanding what the agentic web really means, and also the comfort level people have with privacy versus AI. Because ultimately, the more you lean into privacy, the harder it is for AI to be useful. And the more you lean into AI and its full power and utility, the less privacy you're going to get by default because the AI has to be able to integrate with your systems in order to be useful. So it'll be really fascinating to see how both paid and organic teams navigate this, because at the end of the day, SEO, as we've traditionally known it, is effectively gone. SEO from the standpoint of driving consumers, being helpful to consumers where they are, that's now the mandate, and that's going to be done on both the paid and organic side, thinking about the agentic web.
Got it. So when you say agentic web, how would you define that? How would you break that down in simple terms?
Sure. So say, for example, so I'm a dog mom. I have 3 wonderful dogs, and they love to get into mischief. Sometimes they eat things that they should not eat. And one time my puppy Freya got into my husband's gummy stash, and we were terrified. It was not great. It was like, what's going on? We just threw her into the car, started to like go to the ER. We're like, oh my God, are we okay? In the agentic web era, could have asked Gemini or Copilot or really any AI agent, my dog ate some gummies, is that bad? And the agentic web would be able to look into my files and see that I already have a vet, book an appointment for my vet within a reasonable time, or understand that that appointment is too far out and suggest maybe an ER visit that's close by if it was necessary, or would be able to tell me, hey, this is going to be fine. We can book you an appointment as a checkup with your normal vet, or hey, you can book an appointment with the ER if it was urgent. So I tell that story because a lot of the agentic web examples are e-commerce, like try it on and kind of price shopping, and that it would buy on your behalf. That's one application, and it's one application that honestly I think is going to be fraught with a lot of privacy concerns and potential fraud issues. The lead gen side is actually much more interesting, where people can make appointments without needing to actually think about calendar, like even just us scheduling this podcast. The agentic web could have looked at our calendars, known Navah and Matt are both East Coast people, so we're only going to look during these East Coast times. We're going to find an hour block, knowing that it's probably going to be maybe a 45-minute conversation, but we have the hour to go over. And we know that Navah and Matt are pretty busy, so we're going to probably look for like a Friday, even the afternoon, or we know that Navah and Matt are morning people, and so like we're looking at their morning, whatever the thing might be. Like that's what I mean by the agentic web. And I honestly think the agentic web is more interesting than, say, AI overviews. So the AI mode is far more interesting to me. Microsoft equipping brands with the tools to build their own agents and kind of forge their own future of what the agentic web looks like, that's really interesting to me. Ads and AI overviews, I'm less excited by, because AI overviews by its very nature has a lack of trust. And it tends to be things you want to know, less so things you want to do. Was that okay, or is that still confusing?
No, that makes sense to me. I'm trying to think of a way to like repeat it back to make sure I understand it, because it does sound like a version of AI overviews in that it's synthesizing results into what it thinks is the most relevant in terms of the context it has. The agentic web you described there just takes it even further in terms of it's able to take action, or it's able to schedule things. So I guess the fear in that world is similar to AI overviews in terms of, well, how do you make sure you're in the AI overview if you're going for 10 results to 1? How do you make sure you're in the agentic web if when you go to schedule that vet appointment, of the 10 options in your area, how do you make sure you're the one that gets chosen by the agent?
So the part of it is actually building agents yourself, and actually leaning into having an agent or chatbot that can interface with other agents as part of your site today. Like that's part of it, is actually raising your hand and saying, yes, I opt into those sorts of conversations. But the other thing that's actually very interesting is the Google Business Profiles present the easiest example of how it's all going to play out, because that framework has led into local service ads, it's led into the local search ads, the local ads with shopping inventory. Like, I would expect this to roll out and test in its most specific use cases for lead gen with local first, and we'll kind of see how that plays. So just making sure that your feeds and your business profiles are current. So that's the other thing. Not enough brands actually think about feeds. And there's a big fear with feeds. Unless you're in shopping, for whatever reason, an idea of a spreadsheet with all of your information of all of your websites is terrifying. And this is an area where actually on the SEO side, you could make friends and they could help you get over your fear. Because typically when folks are building out sitemaps, they're building out navigation, they're thinking about the schema markup of a website, it turns into a feed, it turns into a spreadsheet with all of those pages. So just kind of talking with your SEO team and getting that input of, is this the right way to think about the website? Is this the right way to think about the taxonomy of my site? Is very helpful. And then having that feed uploaded into Google is just giving it that additional resource to work with.
Yep. Okay.
I feel like we're really in the weeds. We're not talking about the high level stuff that we talked about talking about, but I hope this is helpful.
No, it definitely is. Because I think getting in the weeds, it helps us get to a stage where we can then make it simpler. I mean, personally for me, so as we're talking about this, what it comes back to is structured data. So, and the importance of structured data. And so it's going to be taking advantage of existing sources of structured data, Google My Business, or sources it doesn't have access to that already exist in feeds. And I think that's like the way to help people realize like, this is changing, but these are the things that you need to worry about and care about and be good at optimizing, know the technicals for, and it's things we're already doing. So I feel less worried.
That's good. And that's the thing, like a lot of fear is just that you don't know. Once you know what the thing is, once you understand why it's working the way it's working, fear is negligible. But when you don't understand, that's when fear can really sink its teeth in. And that's why I liked a lot of what was announced at GML. I liked a lot of what was announced at I/O. I'll throw out there, I liked a lot of what was announced at Microsoft Build and Microsoft Activate. But the thing that stood out to me is how little documentation tends to match the pitch. So another area of fear for a lot of people is they'll hear one thing from the ad platform, but then the documentation says something completely different. And an area where I think all ad platforms could really improve and could help people overcome fear and overcome trust issues is really investing that effort in the documentation and making sure that it's understood, that it's current, that it's written in simple, easy to understand language, that it's not kind of a wall of text jargon, get lost in the sea of our own egos. I wish that, like, even thinking about the events kind of post blogs and their the websites for post the event to kind of look at all the information, it wasn't really easy to find all the individual documentation for all the announcements. You had kind of the general announcements, but there was a lot of leaning into the PPC community to explain this is what's happening, this is why it's interesting, this is how it works. And until the ad platforms take that on themselves and really do a great job at it, there's always going to be a little bit of a trust issue. And when you don't trust, you can become susceptible to fear.
Yeah, it makes sense. Because these high-level pitches, they're designed to be flashy, salesy. And so when you then try and go and find the information, you don't have it, you kind of fill in the gaps a little bit. And that's when, people become a bit uncertain and like you say, don't necessarily trust. Okay. I feel like we've covered off on a big thing there around like agentic search and just sort of simplifying that down to just structured data, which is great. I'm wondering if there's anything else that came out of GML or as part of a wider trend that we could say is causing some fear. I mean, a keywordless future is an easy one for PPCers, but I feel like that has parallels to what we just talked about in terms of structured data, agentic web. But is there anything else you're thinking about in terms of how to approach that new world?
So there's two things I want to make sure we cover in the context of this podcast. One is the keywordless targeting is essentially dynamic search ads. If you had zero problems with dynamic search ads, that's exactly what keywordless targeting is. It's with maybe a few additional signals. So I wouldn't get hung up on the idea of a keywordless targeting as keywords are going away. Sure, they probably will in a couple of years because people won't be searching in a way that keywords are an effective way to target. But just for everyone's purposes, the way ranking currently works within Google is that exact match comes first, then comes PMax search themes, then comes phrase match, and then AI max and broad tie at the bottom. So that's how ranking works. So if you're bidding on an exact match and you turn on AI max, which can run in parallel and not change your exact and phrase match keywords to broad, which is an enhancement, super exciting. Definitely don't worry about it. Feel free to test and know that your exact match keywords will have priority. The other announcement, and this was less of an announcement and more of just a vibe, is that Google and YouTube kept getting brought up in the same sentence pretty much throughout the entire event. And I think one of the areas of fear that has really crippled a lot of marketers is the fear of video. And this is the year where Google and Microsoft, to be fair as well, have really made it inexcusable to avoid video. There are a ton of amazing generative creative resources to really help you build amazing YouTube creative. There are a bunch of amazing advancements to YouTube ad technology. And with demand gen, which is essentially a copy of Meta in terms of targeting, there's a really powerful opportunity to capture not only YouTube, but then also discover and display. So I think if you take one takeaway from GML, it's that SEO and PPC have to become really good friends. If you take two takeaways, it's that video is no longer optional. You have to have a video strategy, and generative creative is an option. If you take three takeaways from GML, it's that they are leaning very heavily into PR announcements as opposed to this is specifically actionable. Now, what I mean by that is the incrementality testing, for example, going from hundreds of thousands of dollars down to $5,000. There's an inherent limit to how much you can do with a $5,000 budget incrementality test. But that's really good PR to tell SMBs that, hey, you might actually be able to get some really great insights if you lean into incrementality testing. And the best way to do that is to lean into YouTube. It incentivizes more YouTube ad investment. The other, what I would argue, PR play is the search exploration or the smart bidding exploration. I think that is a really interesting PR play for smart bidding to try to get people to lean into that. And it's worth noting, this is the other PR play, how many resources that they launched are UI specific and UI exclusive. There are a lot of tools that traditionally launch at the same time in the UI and API. That was not the case this year. So I would keep an eye on the tools that you know and love and look for the ways that they innovate on top of the ad platform to justify you continuing to use them. And I think that you will. Oh, there's one other PR moment that in UI agent that made a whole bunch of changes. Jill Saskingale, Sarah Stamen, and Amit Kabra, love all three. We had this great conversation around how that's essentially a great PR for the recommendations and for auto apply recommendations, just by making it an agent instead of the recommendations page. I will say I actually like the agent a little bit better because it learns and it gets that context, but it's definitely a PR play.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought about the idea of those being PR plays. And I guess just to first go back to the power pair or the power pack as an
the power
called power pack. Yeah, super interesting, and I guess that makes sense that SMBs are a big opportunity for Google who aren't utilizing those features for whatever reason, measurement, creative, and so sort of lowering the barriers to entry for those is interesting. And I agree. Like the opportunity within YouTube seems huge. Like I see a lot of narrative around the cost within traditional search going up, and there are reasons for that, but it's like there's this whole other second search engine that is massive that you could tap into. You just need video. I think what's interesting is a lot of advertisers will set that up. They'll put in 2 or 3 videos, and then they'll leave it for 3 or 4 months and come back to it. And it's like you really have to feed this thing so much, because it will really benefit if the volume of creative is there. I think I saw Gary Vee talking about like how creative is the new targeting, and like even as someone who puts shorts on YouTube myself, and you get all the metrics of like dwell time and when people drop off, it's like you just have to constantly keep optimizing there. It's not something you can just chuck in 2 or 3, leave for 3 months. So I think that's really interesting. And then the ability for advertisers to use those AI tools to create that kind of video creative. I think there has been a demo like that before, and we've kind of tested it, and it's like, it's not quite the same. But it's going to get there. It's going to get to a stage where that's how we're creating videos like that.
And I think it's worth acknowledging kind of the elephant in the room around creative appropriation. So there is a difference between using generative AI and the creative tools to edit into like a prototype of what you're going to launch versus using just wholesale generative creative instead of creating your own content. And I think it is worth paying attention that SynthID, which is Google's technology to identify if any AI was part of any bit of the content, was discussed in the PPC room. So you always want to pay attention to what was discussed at I/O, which is the developer conference, that carried over into the PPC room, because that's the areas where Google is clearly leaning into and maybe wants more coverage. And so the fact that SynthID was discussed in the same breath as look at all these generative creative tools to make amazing ads and to do A/B tested offers for shopping and look at all these ads that can serve on your shorts on a TV, that's super interesting, because it speaks to Google's expectation that, yes, we're here to help you and we're here to lower the bar so that you're not stuck with no creative, but you still need to have some creative. You still need to apply some effort. Otherwise, you're going to get stuck in the average category, which is anyone who ran any PMax generative video ads knows is not actually average. It's pretty mediocre.
Yeah. I think about that a lot recently. Like what happens when you enter a world where, I think Zuckerberg talked about this, where you literally can just set up a campaign, give it a few inputs, and it will just run everything for you. The creative's all automatic. And I think the way I kind of frame it is, we've been here before, where the commoditization of certain types of things lead to lots more of it, but it just means that the stuff that is better, it just raises the standard, basically, is what I'm trying to say. Like, you'll get like loads of AI creative, but the standard, the things that stand above that will be the things that are just way better, just raises the standard. And there's going to be a situation where I'm never going to be able to create creative as good as a designer, even if we both have AI, because it comes back to the prompts as well. The quality of the prompts dictate the quality of the output. Hopefully, I'm not completely wrong there. But
so, a funny story. My husband's an artist. And so one of the things I did for myself is I made a GPT of, am I being unfair to the designer? And it takes all of his input as what it's like being the creative and receiving briefs, and like, are you complete with your brief? Have you accounted for all of the different sizing? Have you provided enough examples? And so even if I'm not using AI to make the creative, I'm using AI to make sure that there's less revisions, so the human effort is that much better. Because to be honest, before I made that GPT with my amazing husband's empathy, I was terrible. Like, I would make the worst asks and I would be so confused why the output was so bad. And then I started putting my briefs through that GPT, trained on, this is what a good brief looks like. This is what we ask for. This is what we expect. And the quality from the humans improved because I made the right ask the first time. And then we were able to get more done because there's less revisions.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's taken me a little bit of time to come to that realization. I think like a lot of people, it's been a case of, oh, this is going to be a problem. Like, where are we going to input here? But I think those two things, it raised the standard, and the people who have that inherent knowledge or those skills are just going to be better at those prompts and being able to provide the right context, guidance, etc. Okay, so I feel like we've covered 2 or 3 fears, which is good. Anything else that we need to talk about?
I think it's worth acknowledging the kind of global fear that we're all in. Like, this is a crazy timeline, and it is worth acknowledging that a lot of people are acting business as usual while all of this chaos is going on. Like, there are tremendous human tragedies happening all around. I'm not going to get into each individual one, just acknowledging there's tremendous human tragedy. And it is okay to give yourself grace in these moments where maybe work isn't as important right now. And to be fair, this is another place where AI can help. Sometimes you don't have spoons to be fully present to do all of the work that you have on your plate. And AI can help you cover so that when you do have the spoons, you can knock it out of the park and meet your deadlines, because it is worth acknowledging that there is a lot of uncertainty. It's also worth acknowledging that there's a lot of uncertainty with privacy and cookies and tariffs and all these various things. Right now, the best thing we all can do is focus on the current rules of engagement, focus on listening to our customers, focus on maintaining our curiosity and our interest in our craft. The worst thing that can happen is that, and this is a personal fear, is that I get bored or checked out of the industry. And like with this week, it's like, I don't know how I could possibly get checked out at this point. Like, everything is going crazy. But I'll admit, last year, I was on a struggle bus of just not being able to find the care because there were so many crazy human tragedies and just a lot of things vying for attention. So if you're finding yourself kind of unsure where to balance your attention, I realize this is more of a human thing and less of a marketing thing. Give yourself that grace, give yourself the grace to test. And it is okay to lean on AI tools to help you get back to the best version of yourself, because you are still the star. You are still the one with the expertise. You're still the one with the brilliant ideas. You're still the one who is providing the value. And it's okay to lean on AI for help if need be, or for your friends and the social connection if need be.
Yep. I'm really glad you said that, because I think everybody's feeling a level of that, and whether it's a mix of everything, whether it's one of those things more in particular than others, it's impossible to avoid the level of change, disruption, bad things going on in certain places. Like it's a tough time, so it's okay to not be okay, as they say. And I think personally for me, it's been a case of like, you don't need to solve every problem right now. You don't need to have everything figured out. There's a lot of change, and you will figure it out. Someone once told me a really good line, and it was that a future version of you will figure it out. And I really like that.
And past versions of ourselves can sometimes be super helpful. So I have found myself thanking past Navah so much for how prolific and aggressive and workaholic past Navah, 20-something Navah was, because all of that output can now still be repurposed and explored and reimagined. So give yourself the grace that you already had the great idea. You don't have to keep coming up with great ideas. You can look back to previous content, previous workflows, and kind of tease those out in today's world. Yeah,
for sure. That feels like a very good place to end. This is really fun. I feel like we covered off some of the big areas right now that, some uncertainty. We talked about some really actionable stuff, a ways to like break things down, and the fact, ending it with like an acknowledgement of like the human element, which we often forget, I think is really good. So really enjoyed this, Navah. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. This was a pleasure.
Of course.